It is a not so magnificent day on Wall Street as big tech is getting pummeled as we begin to close out a volatile month. We'll be discussing the latest from DeepSeek, the yen carry trade, and much more today on Money Never Sleeps. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. As we get going, remember, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Nothing Kevin or I say is financial advice, so please do your own research for making any sort of buys or sells. Kev, it's good to see you. I was sick as a dog last week, still dealing with it, but you know what? We have to push forward. We must persevere, and there's a lot to discuss today. So how are you doing, my man?
Doing okay. Not impressed. A lot of things in the world that have been happening. Sorry about the bills. That pissed me the fuck off yesterday. I've never said so many expletives at a TV screen in like a short period of time. Yeah, so now we know the markets are rigged. So is the NFL. Jokes aside, I'm feeling pretty good. We were looking at the markets right now. Nothing that we weren't expecting. I think this was kind of what we talked about before our break that we last spoke, that there was going to be some potential unwind towards February. But like I said, I'm not impressed, and we'll talk about a little bit why today. I think the markets just, and people, the narrative, people are just not necessarily sure where to pin where this is coming from. A lot of people are saying DeepSeek. A lot of people are, trying to discredit them. You're seeing a lot of people that are trying to buy the Nvidia dip. We're also in earnings week, and we got an FOMC meeting this Wednesday. There's a lot of stuff happening this week, but the timelines and everything are kind of adding up. So while this is a big pullback, not impressed. I think there's more to come.
Yeah, lot to unpack here. We have, like you said, FOMC. We've been, got some more data last week that pointed toward, some continued volatility, and we'll see. The job market is looking. It's just tough right now, man. I'm not really sure what else to say. You mentioned Nvidia, the worst day from a market cap loss in the history of the stock market, I believe, into the tune of like $650 billion. That's a lot of money. 17% down today. Meanwhile, Apple is having a great day, up almost 4%. The joke right now is that they've been so behind when it comes to AI that this isn't even affecting them. The DeepSeek stuff going on. So that one kind of came out of nowhere. And it really, you got all these people who put a ton of money into AI startups, and now they're just like, what the fuck? Like these Chinese engineers just this AI tool that is doing what OpenAI had to raise trillions of dollars to do. So pretty wild.
Yeah, here's the thing. We don't necessarily know if they're able to do what they claim to do too, right? It's so brand new. Obviously the app is flying through the App Store. Maybe that's why Apple's doing pretty well, because everyone's downloading it from the App Store. Jokes aside from that too, but I think that, Nvidia wasn't necessarily the most sound of companies when it came to financing. We do know about vendor financing. We were blowing the whistle on that for a long period of time. So, when things don't necessarily add up, when there is pain, you're going to see a lot of deleveraging happen. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. The fun thing about what's happening here too is that it kind of coincides with the yen carry trade unwind, and SoftBank, who obviously is one entity that has a ton of exposure. Nvidia and tech is just absolutely shit. In Japan last night, I think they were down like 7%. Japan necessarily isn't doing anything too crazy just yet. We're actually seeing the U.S. markets react a little bit stronger than the Asian markets. But, this is something that's just begun. We're going to continue to see how it develops. But, all it takes is one thing to get the dominoes starting to move. And this is kind of a pretty big one when you see Nvidia, a market cap that big, one of the richest companies in the world at one point, just drop like a dead fly.
Yeah, the spike in the VIX today was pretty wild. Got up to 22.5. Come back down considerably, settled in at around 18.4 right now. Where do you want to go with this? like you mentioned, there's an FOMC meeting this week. We have some more data coming out over the next few days. We'll get GDP data on Thursday. We'll get PCE on Friday. So, there's not going to be a rate hike or a rate cut this time around. Not going to be a hike either. But I think Powell's presser on Wednesday is going to really set the tone for the year. It'll be his first presser with Trump in office as well. So I think that expect a highly volatile day on Wednesday. I mean, if you're trading with leverage on Wednesday, be prepared to see some big moves, because I think the market is going to be. I'm not expecting much when the rate decision comes out, but I think it's going to be one of those days where we're going to see a lot of movement during the speech. Like he farts, or he blows his nose the wrong way, and we're gonna see spikes happen. So just be prepared for that. It's gonna be an interesting one. I'm excited for Wednesday's show to kind of dissect that.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing that scares me right here too. I know you said you don't think they're going to raise rates; they're probably going to do nothing. I think that's probably the most sane thing that we can expect from it. However, I will say if we do get a rate cut, and again, I think that if there's a rate cut, he could easily say, well, the administration kind of pressured me, and they put a lot of pressure on us to try and make it happen. You can kind of blame Trump, who could be the black swan for what potentially is the yen carry trade unwind. So what I'm going to pull up here right now, I got the UVIX. I don't want to look at that. I want to look at the DXY. That thing topped. I mean, it went straight to about 110, and then it's starting to drop an insane amount. And why is this important? Well, if we do get a rate cut, or we start to see that we're going to expect some rate cuts in the future based off of whatever he says on Wednesday, then we could probably see the dollar lose a lot of value, and then kind of fuel a bit of a rally into next week in equities, which also kind of lines up with the fact that we have a ton of earnings this week, mainly from the Mag 7 minus Nvidia. But looking at the yen is literally in a downtrend. I don't care what anyone says. You pushed down and you broke out of this bear flag. You went to the downside. You're climbing back a little bit in the U.S. Market hours. You might trade sideways here for a few days, but once there is direction in the market and they know necessarily that the yen carry trade is going to unwind again and the yen's going to get stronger against the dollar, and they've raised rates and we're cutting, you're in a bad position to be anyone in Asia that's pretty much holding derivatives, tech, all that stuff that we talked about from August 2024. It is the same scenario. We're looking at where it could potentially go, probably back to that 141 level. If I look at what's happened up here with the carry trade, with the yen, you got a double top here. And if we go over to the Nikkei itself, this is the one I think that's going to be fun. Wednesday night US, that'd be Thursday morning. That is a double top right there. And this one is actually even a lower high. So what I'm expecting is to see the Nikkei start to drop pretty significantly in the month of February. Now, where could it go? Well, last time we had a 10% drop. It went all the way down to 31,292. Nothing has moved yet, but if I'm looking at this as just a continuation pattern, it has not put it in a higher high from where we were back in July of 2024. So I would anticipate that we're probably looking at another pretty big drop. Again, we need some type of catalyst, whether that's the yen carry trade. Jay Powell says that we're going to start looking at cutting rates or being more lenient and open to QE this year. Anything along those lines, that's going to be very problematic. Now, the interesting thing, too, regarding liquidity and why we're seeing a bit of a market pullback today and why we might be seeing some more pain in the month of February, that the Bank Term Funding Program dropped 81% last week. So we're pretty much at just under $250 million, 247 million. I expect that to be absolutely lost by Thursday, which also lines up with rate cuts, or whatever the rate decision is. And you're pretty much sitting at zero. And the only facility left where you could pretty much draw from if you're a bank is going to be the emergency overnight repo, which is the same exact scenario that we saw from September to like February in 2019 to 2020. Once that was empty, then you had the major crash that we saw, a 37% drop in the S&P, also known as the pandemic crash that we all remember. But we look at liquidity because everything in the markets themselves were saying that we're probably in a pretty bullish situation, especially in the indexes. But we saw that liquidity was continuing to be an issue. It's being drained. It's being pulled. That's a good sign that we're probably going to see some, restructuring of where people are putting their money. Today, obviously, it's Nvidia. Tomorrow, it could be anything else. This is going to be a huge impact on what we can expect moving forward too for the treasury market too. Treasuries are obviously, people are buying them up a little bit today, a little bit of fear, nothing too crazy, but if we get another major spike in volatility and it's negative and the S&P starts to drop with the NASDAQ and Dow all at the same time, you're probably going to see some of those treasuries get bought up and a lot of money reallocate. So right now, it's still very early. I know I talked a lot about kind of what's happening in Asia and the banking system, but these are things that we're just going to have to watch and see how they play out after Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be such a huge pivotal day. If you want to talk a little bit about earnings, what we can expect this week, maybe that might not be a bad segue into potentially what could happen into February as well. So I'm going to pull up the earnings calendar. And we could
as you're doing that, like, as you mentioned, I was looking at the bond market and just seeing, the move in the 2, 5, and 10 year, like a lot of people buying these medium duration bonds right now, just out of fear and uncertainty of what's going to happen next, like how frothy tech has gotten. Is this the beginning of the AI bubble popping?
Yes.
It certainly could be. I mean, I'm not looking to panic here. Like, I honestly still think Nvidia is going to be a strong buy relatively soon. But there needed to be a correction in it. Like, it went too high too fast. You heard all the stories of like the janitors who work at Nvidia are worth millions of dollars because they have stock options. Like, it got out of hand. And so, I think it's going to recover. I'm not as bearish as you. I don't think this is the next Enron sort of thing, but I do believe we're going to be going lower there. And, once it goes under 100, I think it becomes a good buying opportunity.
Honestly, the buying opportunity might be today. I'm not saying that I would be buying today, but it's had a really good pullback. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to try and catch that knife and get that bounce. We saw DeepSeek gotten, that hack or whatever happened there today, which is also funny. So you're going to see a lot of people that are just speculating, like, maybe everyone just overreacted to this. And it kind of lines up with what we were talking about, the BTFP and then earnings this week. I expect with earnings, everything to kind of bounce from today. Right. I think it's going to offer a lot of people who also still have positions to get out of their positions at a little bit of a higher price. I'm not surprised why Apple is leading the charge. You are seeing that money reallocate from Nvidia into other things. But if we look at where we're sitting right now, we can see that Tuesday, nothing really Tuesday, but it's Wednesday, Tesla, Meta, Microsoft.
Thursday is Apple.
Thursday, there it is. Apple's on Thursday. And I thought Netflix was this week too, but I think it's the week following. But we are having some big companies, major companies release earnings. And again,
as well. I mean, we have IBM. There is a lot of the oil and gas is reporting this week also. So I mean, a lot of different sectors that's going to set the tone for the Q1 earnings season.
Yeah, and I think it's very possible that we just have kind of a neutral week. I know, and that's why I said I'm not impressed with the move that we've seen. I would have expected it if it was going to be the black swan, the VIX to have pumped like crazy. It didn't. I think that there is still a lot of VIX suppression out there, and the last few times that we've had a major VIX move outside of August of last year has been in February. When we look at Volmageddon, that was in February. I think February 5th. We also had the pandemic spike where that was in February 18th or something like that, February 20th, right around that date. So February is a pretty big month for volatility, spiking a little bit early. Remember I said that it was spiked early last week too. I didn't necessarily buy into that because it's a little bit on the calendar and timing wise. It just seemed a little too, ahead of the time it should have broken out. So with everything that's happening today, we're seeing a bit of a crush now with it. We got a little spook. I don't think it's going to be scaring people this week as things kind of push up in price. People are trying to buy the dip. People get sucked in. I think next week is when we can kind of be a little bit more cautious and see that volatility picks up once again. I'm just not, with seeing this earnings lineup and seeing how Nvidia is the only one eating shit, but the other ones aren't, kind of tells me that they don't want to let this thing go just quite yet. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, just to keep pushing forward. I think we talked enough about Nvidia. I don't think we need to look at the chart. Looks like shit. We can talk a little bit about Trump real quick, because this is another thing that we kind of have to remember, that this guy might be the black swan too. We saw what he's done with Colombia and how he's getting things done. You just can't necessarily have certainty with Trump. And I think that's one thing that the markets, really appreciated about having Biden in there. It was that there was certainty, right? You had kind of a standard politician that worst case scenario, they're going to keep spending, they're going to keep churning. With Trump, we got the tariffs and we also got the fact that he is just at any given point, he could just be like, nah, screw you. I don't like you. And then pretty much he could just shit talk some company on Twitter. And next thing you know, it's down like 15%. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but, obviously there's no certainty with this guy and the markets don't like uncertainty. So I still think that that is going to be something very complicated for the markets to navigate going into, the first quarter having this guy in office and obviously for the rest of the next 4 years. But that's going to be very complicated for markets to navigate. Let's talk a little bit about, want to do crypto?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Like again, today is a pretty shitty day in the market, but it's nothing really too noteworthy that we need to discuss. You know what I mean? It's not like anything broke for sure. I still think that we're in a pretty solid place to see this thing through. But Bitcoin itself dropped to the 50 moving average, right? It bounced off of it. You're going to find support on that every time, especially if it's the first time testing it and you found support on it back here in January. You haven't necessarily broke below the 50 moving average since August of last year. So, the first test of it held up. There's a lot of people that are, riding on Bitcoin itself now. There are some things that I am concerned about. One thing is, let me just pull up a different chart. Bitcoin on the 200 moving average. I think that's the one thing that kind of concerns me. So like I said, you broke out of this. I thought this might be a fake out. I think we are going to come down and test the 200 moving average. I think 81K where it currently sits, 81 to 76,000, somewhere in this range. I think that's going to be where, if we do see that volatility pick up in February, we get a true correction in the market, a good crash. 10 to 15% for the greater equities and stuff like that. I think we're going to find some support on the 200 moving average, and from that we might be able to see a bit of a bounce towards Q3. And again, I think we have to wait till we get that correction in the markets to say whether it's going to continue or if it's going to bounce. But I do think if we do hold this 200 moving average or trade somewhere around here, we're probably going to bounce again up to maybe even new highs. The repo is out there, so that allows there to be liquidity in the markets, even though they're not doing necessarily QE. It's just there is cash out there for these banks and institutions to use. It means that there is going to be some dip buying at some point. But looking at the greater market, everyone was screaming alt, it's alt season. I'm looking at XRP last night. XRP had a shit night. It was down 10% at one point. It opened up here. It was down, even more, 12%. Went all the way down to 264. Things had bounced back. We look at ETH, lost the 200 moving average. We're probably going to need a death cross on there. I wouldn't be surprised if once we get to the death cross, maybe that's a bit of a buy for ETH and it bounces from there for alts. But it definitely was, everyone was a little bit too early in claiming that this was alt season, right? Everything kind of broke down from here. It's a good chance still that if we do have a fairly good crash with Bitcoin to, the 80,000 level, that we could see the 200 moving average tested for a lot of these things, for this is Cardano right here. AVAX is below the 200 moving average. So maybe when you get the death cross there, somewhat at ETH. Solana is testing the 50 moving average. It could test the 200. I have no, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that it does so. And then if we look at XRP one more time, XRP I feel can go to the 200 moving average as well. It really depends on how Bitcoin performs and what happens with the greater market. But as of this right now, we're waiting more for a correction than we are for, continuation to the upside. I think continuation to the upside will come at some point. It's not probably for the next month or so. That's just my opinion. But I would love to hear what you got to say on this one too.
Well, I'm really focused on Fcoin at the moment.
Oh shit, we didn't talk about Fcoin.
You got Fcoin down under $1. It's trying to rebound. It went as high as 250, 2.5 billion market cap as recently as the 19th. So, we've seen a pretty big pullback here on Fcoin, and maybe that's a predecessor to an even bigger move down for the broader market. As farts go, the market goes. Right, Kevin?
Yeah, it's good to take a good whiff of this one because it's probably going to be it's going to be the silent but deadly killer for the markets. If Farcoin loses liquidity, you're all fucked. Your puts are going to be in the money. But looking at Farcoin here on the weekly, this is probably the biggest joke ever. Volume came in heavily when the price was barely moving up, and as soon as the price started going up, the volume just dropped considerably. So again, that was bearish divergence. At some point, it was going to break. It's down last week 48%. Speaking of other things, look at Trump. I don't know what that's doing today, but it's probably ain't great. 26 after being all the way up at 78. Still, if you bought down here, you're still in the money.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I could have bought that night and I didn't because I'm a fucking idiot. And do I regret it? Yes and no, because I don't know what to expect with this thing.
I've been focusing more on ETH and Solana lately, and with ETH, just seeing what Vitalik has been talking about on social media around like the direction of the Ethereum Foundation and how it doesn't really seem like they have one right now.
Yeah, he sold today.
Like, I don't know what is going on at this point. And so it makes me wonder, like, do I need to cut my ETH position? Because it's a fairly sizable percentage of my overall crypto portfolio. Is Solana going to be where a lot more of the transactional stuff that I had faith in Ethereum are they going to be taking that over just with the speed, with the lower cost? And they were also, it was taking a long time. Like, there were a lot of issues with Sol last week as well, like between the network going down, transactions taking like over a day. Like, it just makes me like, is this how someone becomes just a full-blown Bitcoin maxi and just says, screw it, like, I'm not even going to worry about, these people having to deliver on something. I'm just going to hold, for all intents and purposes, the digital gold out there. Like, that's where, and XRP, I don't really have too much interest in. I did see that, it's been hinted at that a lot of these US-based cryptos could be subject to no capital gains tax, which would be a positive in XRP's favor. But I don't know if I can get there right now with how frothy the market has gotten and how, it's still being close to $3, like just under $3 is wild compared to where we were earlier this year. So earlier last year. So yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. XRP is one that, obviously I fucking hate it because I'm just terrible timing with it. It's just been one because of obviously with the SEC and then stupid like little victories that they've had along the way where it necessarily didn't win the case, but it just seemed like people said, "Oh, they're going to win now." It's caused shorts to spike. It's XRP's been one that screwed me pretty much for a long time now. But I do think that there is going to be some really good price discovery if we bottom here in March. I think there's a good chance we have a really big rally going into towards the end of the year with XRP, just with Donald Trump. And if he announces anything over the summer that says, we're pro crypto or anything like that, I mean, they're pretty much like those guys. You see the pictures with him, Brad Garlinghouse. I think that there is going to be some type of, their benefit for XRP. Again, I'm not going to buy it here. Like you said, it's $3. If it hits the 200 moving average, maybe I buy, maybe I can get like a 5-6x. It's very possible.
I think one thing that does make me bullish overall is just Cynthia Lummis being, heading up this digital asset committee under the Trump administration. Like, I do think that I think she's been in this fight a long time, and I have faith in her to do a good job here. So I will say that I think that's overall bullish for crypto.
I completely agree. I'm not a fan, but I do. I don't think she understands technology. I think she's got a good, anecdotal understanding of it, like most people who've read a white paper. But I do think that just having someone that bullish on crypto, inevitably in charge or something like that, probably going to be very beneficial for the asset itself. I do want to look at ETH real quick because you were talking about cutting your position. I've talked about this for a long time. It's in an ABC corrective pattern. I think that if we are unable to push to the new all-time highs, then we can expect new lows for the cycle. I've said this forever. I still believe that based off what the chart's doing. Elite wave theory hasn't necessarily been successful for a lot of things. I blame liquidity. I blame, stealth liquidity, whether it's the BTFP, other things like that we've seen, Tether. But when I see this, and if we're not able to push above this all-time high, 48.54 or something like that, then I expect us to crash to new lows to finish out this pattern. It just is what it is. That's what I believe. And unless I'm wrong and I have the wave count completely wrong, but this seems like this is a multi-year ABC corrective pattern. I do think that it's probably going to bottom out, whether it's end of 2025 or start of 2026. But where that puts us is south of 890 bucks. Is that a perfect opportunity to get into ETH? I think with you saying that there's a lot of problems with Ethereum and the Ethereum Foundation, I also saw that a Vitalik sold some ETH, I think, recently. It's just like, it's not necessarily a bad thing if ETH does go that low. Obviously, if you're going to trade it, you buy low, you sell a little bit higher. You can't lose. But I do think you need to see these next few months ETH break above all-time highs to make sure you don't go below the 890 level. So it's going to be very interesting to see something that hasn't moved at all except to the downside. Try and break to the upside along with the rest of the broader market when there's probably better assets that are out there that will rally, 5, 6, even 10x at some point.
All right. Anything else, or is that a good place for us to leave it today?
Nah, it's good. Nothing crazy till Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday's going to be a big one with Powell speaking, with all of these earnings coming out. Massive, massive week upcoming here in the market. So appreciate those of you who joined us today. If you have not yet, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment if you're so inclined. We'll be back on Wednesday afternoon to talk through the Jerome Powell presser, to look ahead to some earnings. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you on Wednesday.
Take care, everyone.